Okay, so I'm live. So good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are joining me on the planet. My name is June Allen. I am a racial trauma therapist and I'm the founder of the Art of Greatness at juneallen.net. So today I want to talk to you about Windrush. Okay, so if you live in the UK, maybe you've heard of it if you don't live in the UK, but for those of you that do live in the UK, there's a lot of content out there at the moment. There's a lot of stuff going on at the moment around Windrush. Tomorrow is the anniversary of Windrush. If you don't know what Windrush is, Windrush, or Empire Windrush as it was called, was a huge ship that came over from the Caribbean in 1948 to help. They invited loads of black people from the Caribbean to come over to Britain to help rebuild the country after the war. And tomorrow is going to be 75 years. Okay, tomorrow is going to be 75 years from when that ship actually came over to the UK. And so I've just been thinking about, what was going on for those people at that time. And I've just kind of been looking at the resources that I've got, the books that I've got, and all of that kind of stuff. How does that apply to therapy and all of that kind of stuff? So I thought that I'm going to do some more detailed sessions around specific issues around Windrush and how therapy, what the link is between Windrush and issues that need to be discussed in therapy. But I thought what I'd do initially is just maybe share some of the books and the resources that I've been using to do my research, because sometimes people do ask me, what book am I reading, where do I get that information from, all that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to jump onto that. It's going to be a really quick one today, and just share some of the resources that I've been using to research this stuff around Windrush. And maybe there's stuff that you want to read, experiences of people that have been impacted by Windrush. Maybe you're a Windrush parent. Maybe you're one of the people that came over. Maybe that you're one of the generations that were born in Britain, but your parents came over here, not necessarily on the actual boat itself, but maybe that you were subsequent. Because my parents came over in the early 60s, which was a lot later. But yeah, so I mean, I still kind of class my parents as kind of that generation, I suppose. But anyway, I digress. So I wanted to share with you. Hi everyone, thanks for joining. I want to share with you some of the resources and stuff that I've been using. So this first one, I've just literally had this one delivered recently, and it's called "When Will I See You Again?" Okay, I don't know if you can see that. It's edited by Zindinka Kamazeni. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Kamanzeni and Natalie Smith. Okay, so what this is, I'll read the back thing so you can get an idea of what it's about. So it says Britain might seem a cold, unwelcoming place to a child who has grown up under the warmth of the Caribbean sun, and for some of the writers of this anthology, their first glimpse of grey skies filled them with dread. Yet for others, their arrival in Britain was heralded by feelings of excitement and an almost fairy tale optimism about a land where some believed they don't have poor people and there was no dunce people. When Will I See You Again charts the experiences of a group of Caribbean people who came to Britain as children between the 50s and 70s and began a new life, often parted from their immediate family. In both style and content, it is a book of contrast, prose with verse, expectation with reality, past with present, separation with reunion. There are inevitably moments of pain and conflict. Many of the writers faced racial discrimination, poverty and a sense of culture shock in this alien environment, but more striking is the collective mood of positive energy they exude as they tell their individual stories of success and celebrate the essential happy marriage of two cultures. So somebody's put thank you, wondering what us as a next generation can contribute to healing this experience. Oh, great. Okay, so I'm on the right track then. So listen, if you've got any questions that you want me to talk about specifically to do with Windrush or whatever, please drop them in the comments. Or send me a DM or email me info@godofgreatness.com. But yeah, I think a lot of people, people talk about Windrush. We know a little bit about, our parents coming over around that time. A lot of them faced a lot of hardship. A lot of them faced, a lot of discrimination and all of that stuff, poverty, housing discrimination, all that kind of nonsense. Then there's the Windrush scandal that happened in 2018, I believe, where, you know, the government didn't document all the Windrush people properly, which meant loads of people got deported. And it was awful. It was absolutely disgraceful. So, you know, there's a lot behind a lot of that. We know the stories. We understand some of the stuff that's gone on, and we're starting to hear more about people's stories. But when we talk about it from a therapeutic perspective, you know, I don't see people really talking about it publicly about, you know, what's been the impact of Windrush, you know, what happens therapeutically, you know, what's happened as a result of Windrush. I mean, some of the stories that are in here, I mean, I started reading some of them, and you know, they talk about, you know, a lot of people left their children in the Caribbean to come here and try and earn a better life, and a lot of people also plan to come here temporarily, then they were going to go back home or send for their children to come. Okay, but for a lot of children that didn't happen. Sometimes their parents didn't go back at all, and they got left with grandparents or other family members, or sometimes people they didn't really know that well. And sometimes the children did come over. They did send for the children to come over, but by that time, a lot of the children that came over, it was years later. So a lot of them were grown up, and they came over here as strangers, you know, to families where, you know, maybe the adults that came over here, they'd already started to have other children and started to build, you know, other families. So these children were coming from Jamaica into families where they felt like strangers, and they had siblings. They found that they had half siblings, and, you know, siblings that were born and raised in the UK. So that created a lot of conflict. You know, there's attachment issues going on there. There's this sense of belonging. There's the clash of the two cultures. And I think sometimes people can romanticize as well. They can romanticize, even in just reading this bit at the back. It talks about, you know, people celebrating the happy marriage of two cultures. I mean, I don't know how, you know, I mean, it'd be interesting to read, you know, how that works, because even now people are still, you know, we're still struggling with the two cultures coming together, because we're still experiencing discrimination. We're still experiencing racism. Okay, you know, even if we're born and raised in the UK, we still experience it, because at the end of the day, you know, I don't see myself as British. I was born and raised here, but I don't call myself, because I don't always feel like I belong here. You know, there's always seems to be some sort of backlash, or some sort of, the way that the government behaves and the way that the people behave sometimes. I still don't always feel like our community is welcome here, because of the struggle that we're still under. And the fact that all of that stuff happened with the Windrush scandal and all of that, I mean, how welcoming really is this country? It's almost like they used our ancestors, you know, on the plantations to make money, and to build wealth and build their power. Then they got us to do this mass migration to come over. They lied to a lot of our parents, telling them that the streets were paved with gold and all this kind of nonsense, to kind of seduce them to come over here, so that they could, because they needed the bodies to kind of rebuild the country. You know, and then when people have come over here, you know, it was cold. They didn't get a very warm reception. And then obviously, even as little as the 200, was it 2018 Windrush scandal, proves that they're still treating our community like crap. You know, so it's, you know, all of these things are really important to kind of talk about, and to air out, and to think about, you know, what has been the impact on you as a person, and what's been the impact on your family, what's been the impact on how you feel about your culture when it comes to Windrush and stuff like that. Because I think sometimes people can romanticize it. And yes, you know, we have contributed a lot to this society. We have brought a lot of colour and texture and flavour and all of that stuff. Things like the Notting Hill Carnival and all of that stuff, you know, it's because of all the different cultures from the Caribbean and stuff that have really helped to shape British culture. You know, the music scene has changed quite a lot of things like lovers rock and all of that sort of stuff. These are all things, flavors from the Caribbean that have now been woven into British culture. You know, which is absolutely fantastic, and all of that is well and good. But on the other side of that, there's also generations of us that are still suffering from the impact, the loss, the grief, all of that stuff around the fact that, you know, many people were left in the Caribbean, or when they did come here, you know, they weren't treated. They weren't treated. They didn't feel like they belonged. That, you know, the attachment wounds and all of that kind of stuff. You know, so that's really what I want to talk about. I want to talk about my speciality is talking about stuff that people don't want to talk about. When it comes to therapy and stuff like that, I like bringing up the conversations and talking about stuff that people don't always want to talk about. You know, and it's not because I'm trying to be negative or anything like that, but I think that sometimes people don't really know what's going on for them. They don't always realize that they're suffering about certain things until it's actually spoken about. And I don't want to my thing as well is that secrecy is a huge thing in our community, not telling the truth to ourselves, being in denial about stuff when we're in pain. Okay, it's not all very common for us to be able to talk about stuff. So I feel like I have a responsibility as well as a therapist to bring these things out in the open, to make people feel like they're not alone, to help them understand that I understand what they're going through, and to think about ways that you can start to empower yourself to deal with the losses, to deal with the stress, to deal with the attachment stuff, whatever is going on. So that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to help. So anyway, that's when will I see you again? Okay. So I quite like it so far. I'm obviously just dipping in and out of it for content and just see what I can find. So the other one, and this woman who wrote these two books actually is one of the great pioneers of doing this work, and her name is Elaine Arnold. Okay, and her work is really really pivotal on focusing on the impact of immigration for African and Caribbean people in the UK. So she wrote this book, okay? It's called Working with Families of African Caribbean Origin, Understanding Issues Around Immigration and Attachment, okay? So let me just read a little bit on the back so you can understand what it's about. So on this one, she says, many of those who emigrated from the Caribbean to the UK after World War II left behind partners and children, causing the breakup of families who were often not reunited for several years. In this book, Elaine Arnold examines the psychological impact, okay, the psychological impact that immigration had on these families, in particular with relation to attachment issues, okay? She demonstrates that the disruption caused by family separation from both family and country often had long-term traumatic consequences. The book draws on two studies carried out by the author in 1975 and 2001. In the first, she interviewed mothers who had emigrated without their children, and in the second, she interviewed children, now adults, who had been left behind and were later reunited with their parents. This insightful book will assist all those working with with people of African Caribbean origin in the UK to better understand their experiences and the impact that separation and loss has had on their lives. It is essential reading for social workers, counsellors, therapists, and any other professionals working with families of African Caribbean origin. So this one is really really important. So Elaine Arnold, she actually created a website called the Separation and Reunion Forum UK, okay, which is an organisation dedicated to highlighting the traumatic effects of broken attachments, separation and loss. Okay, so Elaine Arnold was a previous worker as a teacher, previously worked as a teacher, a lecturer, childcare worker, counsellor, psychiatric social worker, and her interest in attachment and issues and separation first sparked in the late 1940s when teaching in a school in a children's home in Trinidad and Tobago. So she's got a history of doing a lot of work around attachment. So this is really really good. So what I'll do over the next few days is I'll pick out a few bits to read and talk about how that can be applied, or how that can be worked through and stuff in therapy. So yeah, I think this is not just a story about, when we talk about Windrush, okay, this is not just a story about people that came over from the Caribbean to the UK, okay. I actually did a presentation when I was at college on this subject, and one of the things that my tutor said to me that was actually really powerful and really relevant was the fact that this is like a double migration, because the first forced migration that we had, okay, during enslavement, okay, that's number one, okay, they were taken to the Caribbean, okay, and then to invite people over again to come over to Britain from the Caribbean is another layer of migration. So I think that sometimes the conversation around the first migration, the first forced migration from Africa to the Caribbean, okay, that is also part of this conversation, because we're talking about two major two major events in history, okay, that involves separation, that involves abuse, that involves racism, that involves systemic oppression, that involves poverty, that involves trauma. That, there's a lot to unpack. Okay, there's a lot to unpack, and all of this has had an impact on the black family. All of this has had an impact on the black family, how the black family is structured, and how the systems of oppression have used us for their own ends, and don't give two shits. Okay, they don't care about the impact that it's had on us. They don't care about the impact that it's had on our parents. Okay, they don't care about the impact that it's had on us. Okay, is the generations that have come after Windrush. They don't care. We've been left to fend for ourselves when it comes to the psychological impact of all of these things. So what I want to do is talk about some of the things that have impacted us as a result of these forced migrations. Okay, some of the hardships and stuff that our parents have had to deal with, and the impact on their inability to be able to raise their children in a way that's healthy and stuff like that because of all of that stuff. And and also be sharing some of some of the ways that it can work in therapy, some of the things for you to think about as well, some of the things for you to take into therapy and think, okay, I never really thought about it like this before, but my parents are from the Windrush generation, and these are the issues that come up as a result of that, and I'm going to take this into therapy because maybe there is something in this. Okay, so the last book that I want to talk about, and this is really good, this one, and this is more for therapists out there. Okay, it's probably not for the standard people, but for therapists. And this one's called Unmasking Race, Culture and Attachment in the Psychoanalytic Space. Okay, Unmasking Race, Culture and Attachment in the Psychoanalytic Space. So this one obviously is going to be more about psychodynamic theory, okay, and talking more about from a therapist's perspective the impact of that, and how to work with clients. But there's some quite profound things that I've kind of underlined in here. So let me read some of the stuff that I've got in here. So it says, culture is not a rigid or closed system of ideas. It is a flexible construction of the world to which a certain group of people belong, which is geographically and historically specific. Okay, hang on a minute. Yes, he was basically defining what culture means. Let me just see what else I've got in here. Oh, and he talks about child development. Wow. Talks about child development as well. It says, from an attachment perspective, young children receive conscious and unconscious psychosocial cues initially from their parents. This process determines the nature of the child's exploration of the environment and will play a crucial role in shaping their own sense of psycho-racial identity. So basically, I'll go into more detail, but I'll pick some really good bits and do a proper live stream on this particular thing, because it's quite good. But basically what this book is really saying is that we don't, when we talk about attachment and stuff like that, we're not just talking about attachment as it applies to a parent, okay, or a family member or something like that. When we talk about race and culture and stuff like that, you also have to talk about attachment within the context of how we attach to society or lack of it. Okay, so when we talk about immigration, and when we talk about the stuff that's happened to our ancestors coming over here during Windrush, we also have to talk about the trauma and the suffering that also happens as a result of them not feeling like they belong, not feeling like they can really attach to society. Okay, because of racism, because of oppression, because of whatever was going on. So all of these things are all kind of woven into the conversation around attachment. So yeah, this one is actually really, really good to think about that. Okay, so this one is again, it's Unmasking Race, Culture and Attachment in the Psychoanalytic Space, and it's written by Kate White. Okay, by Kate White. So let me just read the stuff on the back so you know a bit more about what it's about. Drawn from the John Bowlby Memorial Conference, the theme of this book addresses the often hidden and ignored subject of attachment, race and culture. Can our individual narratives in relation to race, culture and attachment be unmasked in the therapeutic dyad to reveal our human connectedness? The contributors explore how the conscious and unconscious meanings of therapists' and clients' racial and cultural identities shape the dialogue between them. How this emerges for both therapist and client in their work together is illustrated in clinical accounts. The value of the monograph lies not only in the development of ideas around the notion of racial difference, but different routes to exploring better clinical understanding of racial enactments. The absence of relational thinking has far too long located these concerns outside the consulting room. Therefore, outside the scope of thinking, whilst the term race has lost much of its potency as a biological concept, racial difference nevertheless organises many social relationships and for many of us is laden with emotion. That's from Lennox Thomas, psychotherapist. So yeah, I mean this really opens up the conversation around attachment and race and culture within the social context as well as within the family of origin. So that's really good. So the last thing that I'll say actually is in terms of the stuff of resources for Windrush. Okay, there's a documentary that's come out called Barrel Children. Okay, and I think the woman's name who created the documentary is Nadine White, I believe. I believe it's Nadine White. But if you Google Barrel Children, it will all come up, okay? So Barrel Children is actually going to be coming out in lots of cinemas. I've actually bought tickets to go and watch it. I can't remember which cinema I'm at. But if you Google it, you can go to a cinema to go and watch it. And the film is all about this type of stuff. It's all about the children that were it's interviews, it's a documentary, children that were left in the Caribbean, children that came over here, and it talks about all of their stories and all of that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in kind of diving more into the whole thing around Windrush, what that means for you, just understanding a bit more of our history around it, then I think going to watch Barrel Children is a really good opportunity to be able to do that. Okay, so that's it for today. It's a really quick one today. I'm not doing much educating today, so I just wanted to give you some info. Well, I am kind of educating, giving you books and stuff, but I just thought it was a really good idea to share with you some of the resources that I've been using around Windrush. So if you're interested in that, if you want to find out more about Windrush, you can get those books as resources. And find a place to go and watch Barrel Children. All right. So any questions or anything that you want me to talk about within the context of Windrush, send me a DM or email me info@yardofgreatness.com, and I'm happy to do a live stream on that. For the next few days, I'm going to be talking more about going a bit more in depth in this topic. All right. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye.